Hi, I'm Bennabelle, but you can call me Belle. This is one episode in my Tinkering Bell series. In the Tinkering Bell series, I showcase my metaphysical and esoteric tinkerings, a practicum based on my particular idiosyncrasies in the craft. This is episode 3, Architecture of Sacred Space, part 2 of 2. To cover sacred space design, we needed 2 videos, and this will be the final installment. Whether you are designing the blueprint for a church or temple, seeking out a home and living quarters that will be empowered as sacred space, a burial site, or setting up your altar, there are 5 fundamental principles for designing sacred space. We covered harmonic resonance in episode 2, part 1. Now let's continue to the other 4 fundamental principles. After harmonic resonance, the second fundamental principle that we consider is magnetism. The third is the orientation of the site. The fourth is to account for water. And finally, the 5th principle is anchoring. Let's begin with the second principle, magnetism. I'm guessing you have a fairly good understanding of how magnets work, specifically magnetism of iron or even a natural iron ore called magnetite. You know, like the magnets on your refrigerator. North-south polarity, opposites attract. Yeah, you know magnetism. But that's just a specific form of magnetism called ferromagnetism. Magnetic fields persist in so many other ways in our world. Did you know oxygen can create a magnetic field, albeit a weak one, called paramagnetism? I don't have to explain ferromagnetism to you because that phenomenon is something you can see. Other forms of magnetism, whether that's paramagnetism or other types of electromagnetic fields, can only be detected by sophisticated laboratory tools, and who knows what other forms of magnetic fields there are that we simply haven't figured out. Chinese feng shui has been talking about electromagnetic fields or EMF waves for centuries. EMF waves are bad feng shui. Other particular forms of yin-yang states or other forms of magnetism represent good feng shui. Sidebar: one of the earliest records of magnetism is from a Chinese text dated back to around the 4th century called Gui Guzi, translated into English as the Sage of Ghost Valley. The Sage of Ghost Valley is an intriguing text because it covers a lot of different ground. It instructs on the principles of rhetoric and oral persuasion, which very much parallels what we now know as NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, and also the concept of reverse psychology to attract what you want. But it also talks about the alchemical and chemical relationships between yin and yang, positive and negative, and talks about magnetism. We can learn from magnetic phenomenon and apply that to philosophy and psychology, instructs the text. A variation on what you might now know as the Socratic method is expounded upon using magnetic theory. Polarities such as speech versus silence, action versus non-action, reflection versus reaction, positive and negative polarities are all forms of yin and yang, and so the fundamental binary, yin and yang, correlates with magnetic phenomenon. Now, I mention all that because you can start to see how it applies to the law of attraction as New Agers talk about, right? You can see how occultists might reap benefit from reading the Sage of Ghost Valley and applying it to metaphysical craft. At its heart, the Sage of Ghost Valley teaches us this: understanding yin and yang for the production of a magnetic field can help us control attraction and opposition, and it is within a magnetized field under the principle of magnetism that synchronicity is created. Take some time to marinate that concept in your mind. In the meantime, I'll move on. Paranormal specialists often attribute heightened ghost activity to unique electromagnetic fields. Chinese feng shui teaches us that certain alignments of electrical power lines, or what you can observe in the flora and fauna of an area, reveal magnetic fields that diminish our vitality. So one pretty easy rule to apply right away for sacred space, according to Chinese feng shui, is to keep electrical equipment as far away from sacred space as you can. Avoid electrical lamps and opt for natural candlelight if you can. Try to keep separate sacred space and space that includes televisions, computers, or electrical cords. Those are very simple beginner-level magnetic principles to account for in sacred space. Now let's talk about bioelectromagnetism, or the study of how electromagnetic fields and biological organisms interact. Your cells and tissues produce electromagnetic fields, and the bioluminescence of certain bacteria and organisms is a visible example of bioelectromagnetics. Chinese magnetic therapy, a form of holistic healing, is another form and facet of bioelectromagnetics, albeit one that Western medical science doesn't recognize at this time. Sidebar: biomagnetism, by the way, studies how living organisms produce magnetic fields and then how those autonomously produced magnetic fields impact the surrounding environment. A possible theory for why magic and spellcrafting works? Only time and some really innovative scientists or occultists in the future can tell. When we talk about ley lines, we're essentially talking about magnetism and magnetic fields that create certain frequencies of harmonic resonance. Ley lines, in a nutshell, are alignments of landforms that create a magnetic field, and such a magnetic field produces harmonic resonance. Or, another way to put it, a particular collection of landforms will produce a powerful electrical charge, a force of nature that will impact human activity and, more significantly, heighten human capacity. Heightened human capacity might then manifest as a psychic phenomenon or particularly strong mystical or spiritual experiences. You might think of these areas on Earth as places where the veil between the different planes or dimensions of existence are thinner, and so spirit realms are more accessible. To identify these ley lines or pathways of potent energy, you can be guided by what we learned earlier in episode 2 about harmonic resonance. Chladni figures, Lisa Zhu figures, what seem to align with the Luo Shu magic square or the mandala, and thus plot out these ley lines and locate specific areas and spots with strong magnetism. Geomancers and feng shui masters specialize in identifying ley lines. It's a complex study that I won't be able to explain to you with any competence over the next few minutes, but essentially, you'd have to know which natural landforms correspond with which fundamental elements, whether you're using Western alchemical four elements or the Chinese wuxing, plot out these formations from a bird's eye view and spot patterns. See if specific figures of harmonic resonance are formed. Some well-known, easily recognizable ones would be Lisa Zhu and Chladni figures, or alignments that correspond with the Luo Shu magic square. And then the pathways of magnetic energy created by the formation are ley lines that a practitioner could, in theory, tap into and draw power from. Whether you zoom way out to assess land formations, or you're looking at just the lot of a single parcel of property, or you're looking at a tabletop for your altar, here's a simple feng shui tip to consider. A tortoise must support you from behind to block the cold winds. Keep a dragon by the hand you fight with. Have a tiger guard the hand you shield with. And before you, may the flight of the phoenix reign supreme. Okay, so needless to say, this is a metaphor. The tortoise is a hill, a fence, a wall, large protective monument, something that's, got your back. The dragon is something that's supportive and will amplify your strengths along the side that mirrors your dominant hand. The tiger is protective and will be symbolic of and effective at safeguarding your weaker hand. This is about defense. The quote, flight of the phoenix, end quote, line is about a clear path in front of you. No obstructions, lots of free space and air. Clear line of sight is what you need. I swear the riddle is way more complicated than the answer here. Basically, something tall and stable in the back, things gotta be at either side, opposite left and right, and in front of you, some clearing for energy to flow, so energy never bottlenecks. This applies whether it's the location of a country city planning, looking at the feng shui of your house, or even an apartment, or just your altar. By the way, I really wish I had more personal photographs of temples and real-life altars other than my own to show you, but it's considered bad form to take photographs inside temples and of altars that aren't your own without express permission, so that really limits what I'm able to feature in the B-roll for these videos. Sorry about that. The third principle for consideration when creating sacred space is orientation. The principle of orientation will overlap with magnetism because the Earth itself has a magnetic field, or the geomagnetic field. Thus, north, south, east, and west are tethered to considerations of that geomagnetic field, or magnetism. The compass school of feng shui is all about orientation. Orientation of sacred space dictates that directionality, location, and positioning in response to certain external stimuli in your environment will further empower that sacred space. Orientation accounts for three dimensions, and how you articulate those three dimensions may differ based on context. In psychology, for example, it's time, place, and personhood. In feng shui, it's heaven, earth, and man. It's again that Trinitarian principle we touched upon earlier in part 1 of Architecture of Sacred Space, or episode number 2. Altars serve different purposes. In esoteric Buddhism, for example, different Buddhas reside in different realms, designated to be oriented in the east or west, etc. So, for instance, in Mahayana Buddhism, where Amitofo is venerated, a Buddha whose consciousness as a realm is in the Pure Land or situated in the west of consciousness. An altar set up for Amitofo would most likely be facing east, so that when you stand before the altar and thus stand before Amitofo, you are facing west, or the Western Pure Land, the directionality of the kingdom of Amitofo. Ancestor worship is associated with Dongwang, a Taoist deity situated directionally in the east. So a home altar for your ancestors, if you follow a certain Chinese Taoist path, would be situated along an eastern wall of the home, meaning the face of the altar faces west. That way, when you face the altar, you faced east. In feng shui, astrology and directionality come together, and based on your exact date of birth, homes with entrance ways facing certain directions are considered more auspicious or totally inauspicious for you. In commercial real estate, orientation can have a significant impact on the market value of a property. So there are clear materialist and physical implications to the architecture of sacred space. Interestingly, properties that have auspicious orientation per metaphysical considerations also happen to be the type of properties that have higher market value in real estate. Funny enough, in the course of my legal practice, I came across an interesting finding. Properties with really shitty feng shui also happen to have a history of lawsuits, foreclosures, liens, structural damage, and other real life bad juju. Even if you don't believe in the woo, I say better safe than sorry. So follow the guidelines of sacred space and keep yourself from buying property that will just end up bankrupting your piggy bank. Orientation is one of those key factors in the architecture of sacred space to look out for. And as it so happens, real estate appraisers would tell you the same thing. Now let's move on to the fourth principle and discuss water. In any sanctified space or sacred space, you don't want to neglect water. So for instance, on a home altar, you don't literally need a glass of H2O on your altar top, but you do want some representation of water in some way. Just by way of example, a moonstone or selenite stone serves as an altar representation of water, or a small cup of a liquid offering, whether that's water itself, tea, or wine. In Chinese feng shui, water fountains in the home are considered auspicious for generating healthy qi energy and inviting in financial success. In Catholic traditions, there's the holy water font, which are typically wall mounts in the home that contain holy water. The practice is resonant with the idea that sanctified space is empowered with water. When selecting a site that is to be empowered as sacred space, a practitioner would want to pay attention to the water flow through that given location. So you'd study underground water, plumbing, pipes, and also accessibility to natural bodies or sources of water. You'd want to test the running water for purity and cleanliness. The inclusion and consideration of water is part and parcel to the architecture of sacred space and, generally speaking, for a healthy living space. The fifth and final fundamental principle for designing sacred space is to consider anchoring. In the Bell Chimes in video series, video number 2, I talked about Jing, the nutritive force, Qi, the life force, and Shen, the divine or psychic force. Every object is a conduit for Shen, and certain natural elements from the earth are conduits for Shen in such a way that it can help produce or facilitate specific results. In other words, gemstones and crystals resonate with a specific character profile or elemental profile of Shen that empowers it to hold certain metaphysical properties. Rose quartz, for instance, no matter which culture, civilization, or point in history you look at, seems to be universally acknowledged as being able to help us balance out the emotional plane. When creating sacred space for yourself, use stones and minerals to anchor energy and amplify beneficent spirit energies of a given location. If protection and defense from malefic spirit energies and poison arrows are a priority, then utilize more black tourmaline, black onyx, dark smoky quartz, or black kyanite. Routinely burn consecrated incense. Burning incense is a form of anchoring and thus goes toward designing the architecture of sacred space. If elevating vibrations, opt for selenite, crystal quartz, prisms, and more multifaceted prismatic crystals in the decor. Metaphysical correspondences of gemstones and minerals, for instance, can be drawn upon for anchoring. If you go to my website, benebellwen.com, or get the direct link in the description box of this video, you can download a free 52-page glossary of gemstones and crystal correspondences to help you get started. I try to think of anchoring as either building energetic dams to trap energy and retain it within the sacred space, or as energetically charged batteries. So these anchors are in fact charging the pathways of energy within the space and amplifying those energies. In Chinese Taoist magic, Fu talismans are used in a given space as energetic anchors. There's also this idea that even everyday objects are anchors, and it can either be positive anchors or negative anchors in feng shui. For example, a television set as an anchor is fundamentally of the element metal per Chinese feng shui. So placing such an object in the, say, southeast area of a home is going to obstruct flow of energy that's good for money making. In other words, a television in the southeast, according to feng shui, is a bad anchor for your wealth luck. On the other hand, in the north area, a television set, because of its metal correspondences, is slightly better and it's going to help amplify energies associated with career success and achievement of professional goals. Another obvious example, the statue of a deity is an anchor. Animal figurines, real or mythical, can serve as protective anchors and totem guardians. Art and paintings, even, can be secretly empowered by the practitioner to then become energetic anchors. One more interesting point about anchoring. When you select a combination of anchors that represent the fundamental elements and arrange those elemental anchors in a way that's based on formulas of orientation, a powerful metaphysical or psychic magnetic field is created. And nearly every culture has intuited that. I have to think many of you watching this video right now are familiar with the concept of setting representations on your altar for, say, fire, water, air, and earth. Perhaps based on your specific tradition, each must also be placed in a specific direction. Now, of course, which cardinal direction goes with which element is getting really specific per your tradition, but the basic concept is there, right? That's elemental anchoring using orientation to produce resonance and psychic magnetism. In Eastern traditions, an altar would have representations of the five elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And when you narrow it down to specific traditions, each magical lineage will have its own instructions on which element has to go by which orientation. So, using the fixed combination of anchors per the four elements or your five elements is one of the most powerful anchors you could employ. That's why so many instructions for sacred space include it. To close out this episode, let's review the five principles again. To create and design sacred space, your first point of consideration is harmonic resonance. Harmonic resonance is about making sure the overall layout of space is aligned with a sinusoidal wave function that is dialed in to the monad or divine of your conception of deity. Homework, and don't think this tinkering bell won't check up on you. To keep things simple, let's work with the Chladni figures only. Check to see if the current arrangement of furniture in your room aligns with at least one of the Chladni figures. If yes, homework done. If not, then think about how you might be able to rearrange the furniture in that room so it complies with one of the Chladni figures. Also use the Lisa Zhu and Chladni figure references provided in episode number 2, part 1 of Architecture of Sacred Space to check your personal sacred space, such as an altar. See if the relics on your altar align with one of such sinusoidal wave functions. Why should you observe mathematical formulas for configuring your sacred space and living space so that there's harmonic resonance? Oh my gosh, I don't know what could be more important. When a magnetic field is created based on orientation metrics and anchoring techniques, and all of that produces resonance, then your space will always be at equilibrium. No matter what extenuating forces swing the pendulum that is your life, one way or the other, extreme positive or extreme negative, resonance brings you back to a place of peace, harmony, and perfect alignment with the divine. When you are methodical, you are precise. And given how high these stakes are, alignment with divine, peace, love, and harmony for the rest of your life, why not observe harmonic resonance? Second, consider magnetism and the characteristics of the magnetic fields produced in a given area. More homework. Remember that whole spiel about the phoenix, tortoise, dragon, and tiger? There are a few places in your personal living space to check here. Make sure there is something tall and stable in the back that's supportive, and just like an armchair, something to the two sides that guard you, and in the front, a clear line of sight. Check your bed. See if the way you sleep conforms to the four guardian animals. Now check your workspace, the desk that you do most of your work on. Make sure when you're seated at that desk, you've got the four guardian animals around you. Sidebar: Feng Shui is a comprehensive study that integrates the concepts we're addressing in this episode, and so the exercise assigned for this homework assignment is a very rudimentary point of assessment that leaves a lot of other considerations out. We'll get to Feng Shui in a future episode, so for now, just consider the phoenix, tortoise, dragon, tiger alignment. The third point to consider, if you recall, is orientation, which simply put is directionality. What direction are certain features of the architecture facing? What direction are you going to display and alter? Homework: using a compass and visualizing the aerial view of your home, check what's in the southeast corner of your home and figure out what corresponding room it is. Let's say it happens to be your kitchen. If you rent just a room or your personal space is limited to just a room, then check the southeast corner of your room. In terms of orientation and harmonic resonance, this is the area of your home that, according to Chinese feng shui principles, corresponds with your wealth, luck, financial circumstances, and money matters. Your homework assignment is to assess this area of your living space to see if it's conducive for generating wealth luck to ensure you're optimizing your money-making and financial potential. How? By utilizing the other four principles we've learned so far, applying sinusoidal wave functions to assess the flow of energy in this area, assessing magnetism, or simply placing some hematite here, which of course gets into anchoring. Checking the flow of water and considering energetically charged baubles to place in this area that will help you to attract more wealth. Hey, look, you want to learn craft from an Asian? This is what you're going to get. Lots of homework. Battle hymn of the tiger bell, bitches. The fourth consideration is to check the flow of water through a given area, access to water in that area, and including representations of water so that the space is at all times a conduit for that which is sacred. Homework. Raise the vibrations of your personal living space with some water. After all, you've heard of feng shui before, right? The Chinese art of magical interior decorating. Sidebar. Okay, feng shui is not magical interior decorating. I'm being flippant, obviously. Sui of feng shui means water. Water is a conduit for the Holy Spirit. Water amplifies the power of Shen in your space. Holy or consecrated water, even better. So your homework assignment is to get a small water fountain for your home, or set out a beautiful crystal goblet on your altar or sacred space, or if it's something you feel aligned with, get a little font for your home. Make an effort to work with water in a spiritual sense. Finally, in metaphysical speak, we say anchoring, but basically it's the interior decor and design of a space. How can you ensure that every last detail of your interior decor is symbolic of and conductive of beneficent energies? Final homework assignment. Choose a gemstone that represents something you want to manifest. Black tourmaline if you're doing some serious root chakra work, shadow work, or need to get rid of anxiety, stress, or mental pain. Maybe go for selenite if you're seeking to connect with angels or raise your personal vibrations. Looking to finish writing a book, you work in writing, publishing, the legal profession, or looking to enhance your communication skills, go with a chunky piece of sodalite. Increase your wealth luck and bring in more money into your life by using green aventurine. Download a totally free gemstones glossary linked in the description box to this video and start working with the crystals and gemstones you're most drawn to and utilize them as anchors. Go through that glossary and select an anchoring stone you want to work with that's practicable for you to acquire, and then go about acquiring that stone. When it's a full moon, sit with yourself and the stone, cup your hands around the stone, close your eyes, and focus on your breathing. Sit tall, shoulders back, both feet planted flat on the ground. Feel your emotions, your desire for that one goal you seek to manifest, the reason you selected this stone in the first place, and feel that emotion as energy coursing through you. Direct all of that emotional energy toward your palms. One palm positive, one palm negative, and the stone in between them is the battery being charged with your intentions, that emotional energy. Then, declare your intention as a statement, matter of factly, with full conviction it is going to happen, and your intention shall manifest. The whole process should be a visualization exercise where you're drumming up as much emotional energy as you can, emotional energy that represents your desire for that goal or intention to come true, and then channeling all of that emotional energy into the stone, charging the stone with your emotional energy. By the way, you're going to want to go with a rather sizable piece, like a palm stone. Then place that stone near your bed where you sleep on a nightstand. Place it somewhere that makes sense for you to be placing a charged battery of intentions for manifestation. Or place it on an altar if you have one, some form of sacred space. Heck, if the intention was work related, you can even place it near your laptop or on your work desk. You've now worked with your personal power to charge up a stone to become an energetic anchor. That battery will power up your space so that your intention as energy isn't just inside of you, bottled up and caged, but now that energy has been pushed outside of you, out into the open space, where a form of magnetic field can be generated, attracting the actual events and conditions needed to materialize your intention. Or so goes the theory. Before, the emotion that is your wish or desire had no outlet, nowhere to go, so your emotion was unproductive. This exercise I'm asking you to do for homework releases all of that caged emotion, charges up an anchoring stone with it, and through that anchoring stone, pushes all of that bottled energy outward, out into the world, so it can finally be productive. Those who practice forms of divination might also be familiar with considering sacred space. It's interesting how universally in any magical tradition, East or West, there's this basic notion that you need to establish sacred space first before commencing with divination. The specificities of how to establish that sacred space, of course, will vary, but still, the common denominator is some form of sacred space, somehow, figuratively or literally, needs to be set up by the practitioner. Prayers, invocations, the placement of certain crystals, burning candles or incense, or simple visualizations prior to commencing a reading are all forms of designing sacred space that, within the span of a few seconds, go through the consideration of basic sacred space principles. When it comes to tinkering, the most fundamental, most beginner level point of consideration is the design and architecture of sacred space. Most of us get more work done and are more productive when we're situated in an office, an environment conducive for our professional work. Your kitchen needs to be outfitted in such a way so that it's conducive for cooking. Can you perform metaphysical work and occult tinkerings anywhere? Sure, you do you, I say. But for the novice, start with the space around you. This is your beginner step. Calibrate the space around you so that it's in perfect alignment with the energies in your space that's going to amplify your capabilities. The stronger your sacred space is toward working with divinity, the more effortless your craft will be. I say novice, but really even the advanced occultist who is wise and humble is still going to fuss over the design and architecture of sacred space. So, you took notes on all your homework assignments, right? I'm trusting you to do the work. Optimize your personal space. Master the points we talked about in this episode and the last, and then we'll be ready for some serious fun. So, what did you think? Let me know. Oh, and while you're at it, got a request for a future episode? Tell me what you'd like to see from the Tinkering Bell series and leave your remarks in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and please help support my work by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notifications for all new uploads.